Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast. Benji and I just watched the end of stage 7 in this year's Tour de France. The most exciting stage so far. I'm pretty excited. Some would even say G'd up. How are you feeling after that finale, Benji?
Honestly, great. I love stages like this, echelon stages. I keep on talking about the Vuelta stage of last year, Guadalajara, that stage that basically exploded the moment it started and had a average of over 50k an hour. And today reminded me of that in many ways.
And the profile of the day, it doesn't look like one of those really interesting stages. There was a category 3 climb, 3 kilometers at 6%, which crested with 8.5 kilometers into the stage. So the earliest categorized climb in this year's Tour de France. And that meant if anything happened on that climb, the race could really break apart. There was then an intermediate sprint at 57.5 k's to go and a few sort of rolling climbs before that, then 15 k's at 4%, like a steady climb, then a long gradual descent broken up by category 4 from 73 k's to 120, and then about 50 kilometers of flat exposed to the wind with projected 25k an hour to 30k an hour southeasterly cross tailwinds, then finishing in Laval about after 168 kilometers stage with a 1 kilometer long 2.5% climb in the last 7 kilometers. So that was the profile. That was the projected weather conditions. Sam Bennett was just ahead of Peter Sagan in the green jersey competition going into the stage. What happened from the bell, Benji?
There was honestly no real breakaway attack at the start. So after a few kilometers, Cosnefroid was the early guy to attack to try and get the points on the Côte de Lucençon, which was that first third cat climb. But while he was attacking, we saw in the peloton some regrouping. We saw that teams came to the fore and Bora decided to start pacing. And when I say start pacing, they really started pacing like crazy. And sprinter by sprinter, they kept dropping from the peloton. Riders like you and Christoph Nizzolo, pulls because of his rib, obviously. Kees Bol and even Mats Pedersen, who I would expect on this kind of stage, in this condition at least, to be up there with the front end of the race. He was also gone on the first hill of the day. And they basically kept pacing towards the top of that Côte de Lucençon, where they actually just caught Cosnefroid just crossing the line. And Cosnefroid even had to do a bit of a sprint to even take his KOM points. At that very moment, Bennett was at the back and had dropped already, also losing time towards the peloton. So at this moment, you basically have three major groups in the sense that you've got the peloton, then you got the group with Bennett, and then we had the group including sprinters like you and Christoph and such.
So in that first climb and in that first split where there was multiple groups on the road, it was actually, I would say 70-30 the climb rather than the crosswind causing that split. And Bora Hansgrohe, the rationale for them riding so hard on the front, which we should sort of set out, is that they wanted to drop Bennett before that intermediate sprint and drop the other sprinters. The fact that none of the other GC riders were really in any trouble and they all made that first split suggested to me that it was the climb that put people into difficulty and maybe a little bit of the crosswind as well, sort of after the climb. But that's why Pedersen got dropped, because I agree with you, Benji. Surprising to see Mads Pedersen get dropped in crosswinds, but I think it was more the climb in that first stage and just a fantastic move from Bora Hansgrohe. But yeah, what happened after?
Bora just kept on pacing, and they did that you would expect until the intermediate sprint, maybe. And they indeed did that until the intermediate sprint. At that moment, we had the intermediate sprint happening, and Sagan actually didn't win that. He came out second just behind Trenton, so didn't take the full point, but it was enough to put him into the virtual green jersey, so that's great for him. After that intermediate sprint, some people would suggest that they would stop pacing Bora Hansgrohe because their main goal of getting that intermediate sprint is done, but they know that Bennett is at that point on like 3 minutes and that Ewan and such are on 6 minutes of that group. So they were thinking if we can keep this up, then we can actually get a stage win like this. And they indeed kept on pacing. I was somewhat surprised to see that no other teams were pacing at that point next to Bora, because I would expect some other teams to see a possibility of gaining extra stuff out of this. For example, we had CCC just sitting there. Why do you think that CCC would not be helping here, considering Trenton was there?
I think they just didn't think they had to. I think they knew that Bora Hansgrohe was going to keep doing it. And I don't really agree with it because, yeah, Bora Hansgrohe kept pacing, but it was they weren't pacing as hard. Daniel Loss had been on the front for like 2 hours. It ended up not mattering because the Bennett group pretty much gave up. Cavagna and it's surprising to me really that they couldn't come back. Actually, before we go to the proper stage finale, is it surprising to you, Benji? Like they got Cavagna, Tim de Klerk, Sam Bennett. I'm not sure which other riders they had there back with Bennett that they couldn't make it back to that lead group. It's a kind of a testament to how clinical Bora Hansgrohe were in that first half of the stage, and that's what made this stage so exciting. Is it's not just waiting for the finale. You've got this race for the green jersey, which I think we called out was going to be interesting in yesterday's podcast.
I think it's a bit of a testament towards the idiom that a team is only as good as your weakest link, and I believe that Bennett was their weakest link at that point. He had exploded already in the race. He was sure as hell not looking great at that moment. So riders like Asgreen and Cavagna and such can pace hard, but if someone behind you can't follow and probably had severe difficulties following their pace as well, then they're going to have to adapt their pace to Bennett to make sure he can follow. And I believe that was pretty much the nail in the coffin for Bennett there as well, because you can have the best team in the world, but if you can't perform yourself, then you won't be able to follow them. And I think that's the case here.
The 100Ks to go, the peloton had 3 minutes on Bennett, and then there was another 3 minutes to Ewan and co. The sprinters still in that group, in the first group, was Sagan, Wout van Aert, Jasper Stuyven, Clement Venturini, Trentin Colbrelli, Hofstede and Mezget. And I'll let you say what happened next, Benji, because it's one of your favourite moments in the race.
So you named the sprinters. We've got a few sprinters that still have a team there that could actually help out. And one of the teams that actually decided to help out in the peloton at that point with Bora was Coca's team. He had two domestiques that he put up front, and they decided to pace as well. And they did quite the majority of the work the next 15 kilometers. And the moment that Coca put those two domestiques at the front, there was one person in the peloton that decided, well, this is not fast enough for me. Let me try it. Let me just try and do a 96-kilometer solo. So Thomas Hand attacked, and he basically just attacked in front of the KOM gate of the Col de Poronong and took those KOM points and the prize money, because Thomas Hand is one of those riders that actually cares about the prize money. Do you think that it's a useful attack?
I mean, it's a good lesson in where is a good place in a race to attack. In that, if you are pretending like you're just going to contest the King of the Mountains points and just try and get that prize money and go in front of the peloton, quickly get them, and then come back. But then he obviously didn't do that. And then, maybe people are less likely to say, oh, he's actually going for a proper attack. We should get on his wheel. But people let him go. And no, I don't think it was a good attack. I think it was actually a waste of Thomas de Gent's legs. Obviously, Thomas de Gent knows more about which stages and when to go on a breakaway than I do. But I think a lot of people I think if it was any other rider, a lot of people would be more critical of saying, oh, well, that's kind of a waste of your legs, given that there were crosswinds coming up. I thought, and we said on the pod yesterday and many times, that Ineos were going to try something whenever there were crosswinds. And on today's stage, if there were crosswinds in the last 50, Sagan and co, you got a couple of sprinters teams there. B&B were pacing as well. It was a long way out, given that it was like a false flat downhill, crosswinds, etc. If there were like a few Category 3 and Category 2 climbs, I think it's a much more sensible attack, because actually on the few climbs there were, De Gent was gaining time on, say, Daniel Oss when he was pacing for Bora on the front, but it was just too hard a parcours for him to make that stick. Like the watts he would have to do relative to the watts people were doing pacing, it's just not possible, given that they were motivated behind him as well. It's not like they weren't motivated.
He was brought back with about 36 kilometers to go when Ineos decided to hit the front in the peloton. And that was basically in the city that was named a lot before the stage, because that was the moment that they turned north a bit. So the wind was more cross tailwind and basically had the perfect ingredients for the echelons to happen. And they sure as hell did.
Yeah, so we saw Ineos lining up before that 36Ks to go, and crosswinds were mooted for maybe from 50Ks onwards. And we saw the GC teams, Ineos in particular, who I got to say, I think Ineos are still, even with a weakened squad, Ineos are night and day better than any other team at placing their GC rider in safe positions throughout stages in all terrain. I still, Kwiatkowski is just unbelievably good at it. Luke Rowe was actually dropped on that first climb of the day, so they didn't have Luke Rowe to try and help in crosswinds or on this parcours. But yeah, they came into Castra, they turned right, and then Ineos pinned the front. We saw they went through like a little roundabout or a chicane, and once you have those roundabouts are like the instigator of, or a chicane or a corner, or the instigator of an echelon, about to form, because everyone has to go single file through it. We saw Kwiatkowski on the front with Castroviejo, Bernal, Amador, Carapaz, all on his wheel, 5 Ineos riders, and then you saw Kwiatkowski just move into the gutter, or not a gutter, sorry, he's a bike rider's width off the gutter, and I knew it was Crosswind Chaos Time, baby. And I don't think the crosswind was that strong. It wasn't like some Handwavelgem carnage, but it was strong enough to make a difference. And it dropped, Pogacar was dropped, Richie Porte was dropped, Mikel Landa was dropped into Group 2, and instantly they lost about 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So, Benji, you said yesterday, I think, or one of us said, some people are saying, why were Ineos attacking or going on the front with 7-8 Ks to go before the finish? It's like, yeah, it probably was, maybe futile given the wind wasn't particularly strong, but you can gain a lot of time very quickly using the strength of a working echelon against an isolated GC rider who's been dropped. And yeah, was there anything I've missed there, Benji? Were you surprised that Pogacar got shelled from that group? Are you surprised by anybody that safely made it into that first echelon?
I'm always surprised that riders that call out the echelons potentially happening before the stage are still caught out with it, because pretty much every rider in the interview before the race said that Castor was going to be the place where you need to be at the front at every single moment. And it's a bit unfortunate that we see riders like Port, we see riders like Pogacar, Landa, people that are really actively working for their GC. They are in the wrong place at that point, and yeah, it's basically a easy beatdown on their GC level, because they now lose quite a lot of time in a stage that is not necessarily one of the stages they expected to lose time in.
It's too late to come through that corner in Castra and then feel the crosswind, be 50 wheels deep, and be like, oh shit, I've got to move up now. It's too late because Kwiatkowski is already absolutely drilling it on the front, 300, 200 meters in front of you, 100 meters in front of you. So you have to be. That's why Ineos moved up early. That's why the minute Ineos moved up, Jumbo-Visma was straight up, and then that itself starts to increase the pace, and it makes it harder for the other teams to move up. So maybe it didn't help that he didn't have Christoph there as well to help him, Pogacar. But yeah, it's a shame to see him, who I thought was going to be a real contender for GC podium, and it's certainly not dead, those ambitions, by a long shot. But what then happened was the crosswinds died down pretty quickly, I think, and all the GC teams started to work together, because whilst we saw nothing yesterday, the Tour de France can explode into excitement at any moment when one of the GC riders or GC contenders is vulnerable. So yesterday, no one wanted to do anything, but you better believe if Egan Bernal had got dropped, if Pogacar was not looking too fresh and had dropped off the back or something, all the other GC teams would have worked. That didn't happen, so nothing happened really on GC. Today, the second Pogacar got dropped and Landa and Port, Thibaut Pinot put all the FDJ riders on the front that were in that first echelon. Jumbo-Visma put Sepp Kuss and George Bennett on the front to drive it. Ineos were using Jonathan Castroviejo initially as a pacemaker, almost entirely the Spanish time trial specialist. So all the other GC teams were basically preying on Pogacar's misfortune, the right thing to do, because they want to eliminate and put as much time into that GC threat as they can while he's down. And yeah, they did a really good job today. I was actually really impressed by FDJ. What do you think, Benji, about Ineos dropping back Castroviejo when Carapaz had a mechanical with 15 Ks to go?
I don't really mind because I know you're gonna say that he's not really their GC guy. He hasn't been performing up to standards, and because of that, they shouldn't drop back Castroviejo, who could potentially help Bernal at the front. But I believe that Bernal was in a safe position at that point, and that he most likely would not have been able to help Bernal too much at that point. So when Carapaz was dropped behind because of that mechanical, I do believe that it was a good idea to even try to have Castroviejo work there, but we saw that didn't really work out because basically the moment that Castroviejo was near Carapaz, the group of Pogacar was already catching Carapaz. So at that point, Castro pretty much gave up already and just went to the back of that group, and they let UAE bring Carapaz back.
I mean, I do agree with you. Really, it's probably good for Carapaz's morale that he sees the team dropping a rider back for him. He wasn't really a threat on GC, I don't think, before this stage. He's certainly lost a lot of time now. I can't even see where he is. I'm looking at GC overall. We'll get to that in a second after the stage. But Benji, do you want to set the scene? 5Ks to go. Can you set the scene of who we've got left in this first echelon?
So we had a stage of 47 kilometer per hour average. And in the last 5 kilometers, we started off the last 5 kilometers at a speed of 69k an hour. Basically, a normal sprint speed. That is insane. We had Van Aert for Jumbo Visma, Sagan, who had his teamwork all day long at Bora, Hofstede, but he crashed throughout the stage, so he wasn't really in shape to potentially sprint at the end. For Israel Startup Nation, Koka was still there, had his two-man work throughout the stage, so definitely should have the legs to work out here. And I somewhat expected Alaphilippe to sprint as well because he was the only guy from the Koenig left there after they basically dropped everybody back to help out Bennett. I think Devanades might have survived as well, but I'm not sure about that. But Alaphilippe was still there, and he would not leave a potential chance like this out of his way because he has won sprint stages before. Not much, but it is always possible. So that indeed was the case. He actually sprinted.
Before the sprint, I had an inkling of that Wout van Aert was actually going to contest it. I thought during the stage, once I saw that first echelon had gone, he was in it, and that Roglic had survived. Once Roglic had survived that Ineos assault in the crosswind section, it was very unlikely once that crosswind died down and it was more of just it was a tailwind into the finish. Roglic didn't need too much protection. Wout van Aert protected him a little bit, but Roglic wasn't really needing too much help. He was fine. And when they sent Bennett and Koos to the front to pace, I thought Wout van Aert is going to be contesting this sprint, and he should be. If Wout van Aert was contesting this sprint, he should be the heavy favourite for the sprint. And as you said, Alaphilippe was not going to let this another stage win or an opportunity for a stage win go begging. But he kind of stuffed up this sprint or made it a little bit weird. So it was NTT actually leading out on the front for Edvald Bosenhagen. He was second wheel. He got left on the front a little bit early. He had behind him Jesper Stuyven, Wout van Aert. Peter Sagan was actually on the wheel of Wout van Aert and was not in great position. Not a great finish to the stage for Peter Sagan. But what happened was Alaphilippe came from quite a way back behind all those sprinters. I think behind Coquard as well. Coquard latched onto the wheel of Alaphilippe, and Alaphilippe started sprinting really early. And I got to say, I'm not actually a big fan of Alaphilippe. I find him kind of grating. He started to sprint to the left-hand side. He moved over a fair way to the right-hand side. You can see it because there's a centre seam in the road. He bumped Stuyven, who then it kind of stuffed up Jesper Stuyven's sprint, who then sort of moved into Edvald Bosenhagen. Then Alaphilippe throws up his hands as if Jesper Stuyven's done anything wrong, but Alaphilippe was the guy who pinched Stuyven between Bosenhagen. And while I'm saying all this, by the way, because we saw the front on camera shot, Wout van Aert, who bided his time actually. If you watch the overhead shot rather than the front on, watch the overhead shot and just watch when Wout van Aert truly launches, and you'll understand how much of a formality this really was. Van Aert was looking to see whether he had a space between Bosenhagen and Stuyven in the middle. He was laying off Bosenhagen's wheel a little bit. The minute he saw that Bosenhagen was holding his line, and there was going to be space on the right-hand side. Van Aert just went 5-7 pedal strokes. Thank you very much. Cruised to the line, posted up before the finish. A nice, what was it, half bike length in front of, I think, Edvald Boassenhagen, or Brian Cockard came in third as well. Nice win, nice second place for Boassenhagen, actually. But yeah, Wout van Aert, imperious, getting the job done when he wasn't even supposed to be contesting this sprint, but just because an unbelievable performance from Wout van Aert. I was pretty G'd up in the live stream. What did you make of the sprint, Benji? Do you criticise Alaphilippe the same way I did?
I indeed do. He does swing left and right quite a lot during that sprint. And in general, it's also a bit ironic that he complains then. So that annoys a bit if you're watching that. Nonetheless, it was a great sprint by Wout van Aert. It's great to see Eddie de Boss back in front in a sprint. He sure as hell held his own against sprinters like Kokar and such, so that's pretty cool to see as well. And Kokar is on the podium, so I guess he's happy as well. And we've got plenty of French riders in the top 10, actually. We've got Laporte coming fourth, Venturini coming sixth. Stuyven actually ended fifth after that collision with Alaphilippe there. When it comes to the sixth spot, yeah, that was Venturini, but seventh, Hofstetter. Then we've got Bernal coming eighth. Wonderful sprint. Yeah, he just finished with the sprinters there. Didn't actually try to really sprint for it, but was up there. Adam Yates coming in ninth from Valverde, finishing off the top 10 there. In previous years, you would probably have Valverde even contest this as well, but yeah, that's not the case, and he's clearly not in a form even close to the years that were before.
So you might be thinking, why is Peter Sagan not even in the top 10 in a reduced bunch sprint like this? And he was in a bad position, I think, from the overhead shot. And then when Alaphilippe kicked, Sagan swung left, bumped into another rider, forced him to unclip. So he didn't really contest the sprint in the end because he had to unclip out of his pedal. So a shame for Sagan, his team worked so hard all day. Yes, he did. He's now in the green jersey once again, I believe. He's 9 seconds ahead of Bennett because of the intermediate sprint, but not being able to even get on the podium or come, second or third in this stage, which I thought was almost a guarantee, is a shame for him. And yeah, I just think it's surprising to me. I'm not going to be like one of those people who says, oh, Peter Sagan, he didn't win the race. He's over. He should retire. I think that's sort of ridiculous. Like, ultimately, they still achieved what they wanted to achieve today, Bora Hansgrohe, and Sagan showed that he's so much better on a climb or at the start of a race in a sharp climb or crosswind like that compared to all the pure sprinters like Bold, Ewan, and Bennett. So, yeah, I'm not going to criticise Sagan too much. He had to unclip, but yeah, I guess a shame for him. Anyway, on GC, the movements on GC is Guillaume Martin moving into third now, 9 seconds behind Adam Yates. Roglic is second, still 3 seconds behind Yates. No movement there. And the big loser for the day is Tadej Pogacar, who's now 1 minute and 28 seconds behind Yates. And yeah, like 1 minute and 20 seconds behind Roglic. Roglic has 10 seconds on Bernal still after those bonus seconds the other day. Esteban Chavez actually has lost a lot of time on GC as well as Mollema and Richie Port and Mikel Landa. Carapaz as well. Interesting to know he's 2 minutes now behind Adam Yates because that's a cumulative amount of time he's lost because he lost probably the 90 seconds today and the 30 seconds from the other day. But anything else you want to talk about from this stage, Benji? What do you think about my opinion of Sagan? Am I treating him too nicely with kid gloves? Or how do you feel about his sprint?
I don't really feel like his sprint is that up to standards this year, and we've seen it enough in the sprints, and it's not that this one day will change that. Wout van Aert is now third in the green jersey classification, and is only 32 points behind Peter Sagan. So imagine if Van Aert wins on Champs, for example, and gets another 50 points. Then that's going to be a dream. And talking about victories of Van Aert, I want to give a fantastic fact for any Belgians out there. Wout van Aert is the last time a Belgian cyclist won 2 stages in the Tour de France was Tom Bonen in 2007. It's been 13 years, and here's Van Aert. Oh, yeah.
Riding as a domestique, not even supposed to be contesting these sprints. And he's definitely going to get a chance on the Champs-Élysées. Obviously Ewan and Bennett will be probably the slight favourites over him for that, but I wouldn't count him out for doing anything in this year's Tour. So far, he's the MVP of the Tour de France, I think by a long way, Wout van Aert, just an incredible tour so far. Already a success for Jumbo Visma. I don't really. Whatever happens with Roglic, it's still been a success because Wout van Aert is looking to me like almost the most complete cyclist in the world. But that's the debate for the off season. The most exciting stage of this year's Tour de France so far. Bora lighting it up at the start. Crosswinds, the pure sprinters getting dropped. I think Caleb Ewan is still on the course, trying to complete it. Then Thomas de Gent attacking. Ineos coming to the front, trying to drop some of the GC riders in that crosswind section, and doing so. Then a reduced bunch, messy sprint with the GC riders leading it out, trying to gain time on Pogacar. The sprinters taking it over with about 1,500 to go, and maybe our favourite rider, Wout van Aert, winning the stage.
In regards to the predictions that we made towards this stage, we're pretty much off. I recall us saying that we had Caleb Ewan on that, and halfway the stage, I was like, maybe he zigzags another 7 minutes to the peloton again, but yeah, that was not happening. So it was not Caleb Ewan, and we definitely lost that prediction. That is for sure. In regards to the next stage on the menu, it is one that is considered a proper mountain stage because we've got 3 major climbs on the day. That is a stage from Cazin to Ludonvielle, and it's one that I've spoken about quite a lot. I accidentally called this one Mio to l'Avant, so oops, that's my bad. I meant that we spoke about Ludonvielle in one of the earlier podcasts, not about today's stage. And this stage actually has 3 major climbs. We start with the Col de Monte, about 50 kilometers into the stage. We've got 6.9 kilometers of 8.1% in that. We have an intermediate sprint just before that climb, so the sprinters should be able to take that unless a breakaway goes and there's less points in the offer, but I would expect Sagan to go into the break tomorrow, personally. In regards to the second climb of the day, Port de Balès, huge climb, major HC climb out of category. We've got 12.2 kilometers at 7.6%. Then we go downhill and basically directly start the last climb of the day, which is the Col de Peyresourde. And on that is 9.7 kilometers of climbing, 7.5%, and then a downhill into basically a flat part of around 4 kilometers till the line. Col de Peyresourde also has bonus seconds on top, so we might see some action for that on that first CAD climb. In regards to the downhill of the Peyresourde, it has had quite a few crashes in the past, but it's not directly the most technical descent. It has some technical corners, as it has, how do you say that?
Well, hairpins?
Hairpins, that's it.
Hairpins.
30
What word
sec-
were you saying? Is that Flemish? Tomorrow, I can't remember what our predictions were. I like to have 2 bites of the cherry. It's hard to say, right? Because we've had that stage yesterday on Montegual, which, don't get me wrong, not as hard as this stage at all. But the GC teams, you have to say they let Lutsenko win. After the stage, I looked at the watts per kilo, easy, 5.2, whatever. They let Lutsenko win. They could have caught him if they wanted. Is that going to be the case again on this stage where they're happy for a breakaway to take those bonus seconds and, they're worried about, oh, well, it's Pinot, I think, said in the media yesterday, oh, well, if it's 12 kilometers from the line, the top of the climb, then we're not going to actually attack because it's not worth it because then you have to hold on that margin on the descent, and that's a lot of pressure. So I don't know. I don't know who's going to win this stage. I'd expect Lutsenko to try and get in a break again if he's feeling all right. I think Romain Bardet, I can't believe he hasn't lost time deliberately so that he can get in the break for this stage. It seems like a big oversight for me, from my perspective. But yeah, I'd still probably pick Roglic for this stage. I don't see anyone dropping him on the climb. And in the run into the finish, yeah, maybe. I mean, Egan Bernal in a flat sprint could probably take Roglic as well. But yeah, if it's the GC guys, I'd say Bernal or Roglic. If it's a breakaway, I've got no idea. Maybe Lutsenko again or Thomas de Gent. It's probably a bit hard for de Gent.
In regards to your predictions that were made on the TDF preview, you had Jumbo attacking Ineos, so your Roglic one might actually happen. In regards to my predictions, I was talking about a breakaway, and I am somewhat guessing that will still be the case. I'm expecting like one rider to survive or something from the breakaway, maybe. But then again, I do expect a lot of action in the peloton from the GC riders that lost time today, for example, because Mollema, I think he's going to try to do something because he's never the guy that just gives up. And Richie Port, most likely, I don't expect him to attack. He also has to watch out. Is it stage 9 tomorrow or is it stage 8? It's stage 8. So he's got one stage to go that is relatively safe for him. So in regards to potential people that might attack, I don't see Port really attacking too much. Who else lost time? Landa, Pogacar. Maybe some action from them.
Pogacar.
That is possible. Yes, indeed, a Pogacar. And I had Alaphilippe for this stage from the breakaway, but he won't be in the breakaway with that
No.
GC. So I don't see that happening. But Alaphilippe could honestly, well, it depends how
No,
hard the
I
pace
don't
is on
think
the
so.
pedestal. I don't think the pace is going to be low enough to allow Alaphilippe to attack at the end of the pedestal in the downhill. So I'm afraid that Alaphilippe might not be a good call for this one anymore. But I'm happy to be surprised.
Well, I think Pogacar losing time today might be a blessing for this stage because he's not someone who takes it lying down. He's a pretty aggressive rider. I think Pogacar will attack tomorrow, even if it doesn't make sense, even if there's Ineos trying to ride conservatively on the front, Pogacar will attack. I hope he does, because I'm sure he has fine legs on the uphills. He just missed out on the split today because he was out of position. I don't think Jumbo Visma, I don't think the train is 100% right now. Bennett and Koos looked pretty good on the flats today, but yeah, I'm not convinced the Jumbo Visma train in the mountains is as strong as it was at Dauphiné. But yeah, hopefully something happens on GC tomorrow. We'll get one LRCP, hashtag LRCP question in from Twitter. That was our preview for tomorrow's stage. But from Max Falkenberg, do you think dropping Pogacar now will turn out to benefit Roglic later the most, since he will feel comfortable working in the mountains with Pogacar on a Vuelta-style tag team? What's your first impression from that, Benji?
I do believe that there is always that Slovenian combo in those two riders. They are pretty good friends, so I certainly believe that they are in a group. That if they are in a group together, potentially just ahead of the GC favorites for some reason at some point in the GC stage, then they will work together. I'm not sure they're going to actively plan out attacks together though. So most likely, if they accidentally end up together, they will most likely not necessarily help each other out, but go for a common goal, and that's possible. Outside of that, I don't really see them, planning out a crime against the other people here.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you look at today's stage, Roglic sent his teammates to the front the minute Pogacar got dropped to drive the pace as well. So there's no holding back between those two riders, or certainly not from Roglic's perspective. If their incentives and interests are aligned, sure, the communication is much better, and they'll be on board with it and it'll be smoother. But I don't think, they're not going to work together in a sense that they'll plan an attack or anything. They're rivals, and them both being Slovenian doesn't really change that from my perspective. But I'm excited for tomorrow. I'll be probably live streaming tomorrow again. I obviously will be, given that I like the Col de Perasud climb. I think Alexander Vinokurov has the quickest time up this climb. Him and Iban Mayo back in the glory days when everyone was on that OJ. I think it's from the correct side. Are we allowed to say that? Am I allowed to be cynical on this podcast? We haven't really gone through the ground rules.
I'm fine with it.
That's not even being cynical, is it? That's just facts. They're wrong.
Did Vinokurov actually win that stage, or did he give it to Mayo as well?
No, there's a breakaway up the road, but Vinokurov dropped Armstrong and Ulrich and gained a lot of time to get onto, I think, like fifth or third on GC. It was really close to Paris that stage, and Vinokurov just went mutant on the Persuade with Mayo, and Mayo wasn't even pacing; it was just Vinokurov, and gained a lot of time. And Ulrich was pacing a lot for Armstrong and chasing them. But maybe I'll save that. I won't stop myself doing an analysis video on that at a later date. That's all from us today. Make sure you rate the podcast if you listen on Apple Podcasts, or if your podcast player allows it. Apparently, Spotify, there isn't really a rating or review system. I mean, if it's not too much hassle, just do it on Apple Podcasts, or preferably just tell a friend about it and say, hey, there's these two lunatics who are doing a pretty good podcast where they deep dive, analyze every Tour de France stage or every pretty much professional race that goes on. So thanks for all the support, guys. Benji, any last words?
Ciao.